Um, Thank you. I'm glad it's recorded. Um, I'd like to call the meeting to order of the Community Development Committee on June the 2nd, 2021, Wednesday. While this meeting is held in person, in consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health concerns, we are offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item and listed on the front page of missionks.org. Can you all hear me okay? All right. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that if you'd like to speak, and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember that your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are part of our in-person group tonight, welcome. Please raise your hand, but stay seated and we will call upon you if you want to come to the podium and make any kind of remarks. When you make your comments, please state your name, the city of residence for the record, and also be conscientious of others trying to speak, and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted on the city's website at missionkansas.org. Please contact the administration offices at 913-676-8350 if any questions or concerns that you might have. Is there any member of the public at this point who would like to comment at this time? Well, seeing none, we will go ahead and begin our action items. This evening we have 6 action items, and we will begin with the first action item, which is the acceptance of the Community Development Committee minutes from Audrey McCallahan.
Thank you. Yes, these are the May 5th, 2021 Community Development Committee minutes for your consideration, please. Thank you.
Has everyone had a chance to review the minutes? If so, is there a recommendation that we accept the minutes as presented? Okay, the minutes are accepted, and we will move to then item number 2 on the action items. This is the Facility Conservation Improvement Program with Emily Randall. And Emily, please join us and give our presentation. Thank you.
One moment, please. I'm not sure if I'm not sure your microphone is on. You're right.
You want to test it?
And Danielle, make me a participant, correct? That's what you're working on. Elevating the, oh, there we go. Okay. Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm pleased to be here with you again this evening to continue our discussion on the Facility Conservation Improvement Program. For those who have not been following along at home or at the previous meetings, we've been working with a state program. This is a state program outlined to save energy with facility upgrades. The City of Mission is looking at utilizing this program at all of our facilities. So here at the community center, at City Hall, and our police building, at Public Works facility, and also an upgrade of our streetlights to LED streetlights. So previous to this meeting, we have discussed with staff and our consultants, CTS group who are here this evening, and council about which program, which energy saving measures to put forward in this project. So we have winnowed that list down to some degree, though largely all that were recommended are going forward for the most part. And we've also, we've presented them in 3 levels, I should say, focusing on the higher of those lists to move forward. So we are moving into, especially for this packet, financing options. So we know that the program outlines some guarantees, and the whole premise of the project is to fund the improvements with the cost, with the energy savings of those measures that you implement. There is a large upfront cost, of course, because you front load the project to put the improvements in place right at the start of the project. So we are included in your packet this evening, and then what we will discuss further is some debt financing options. But we did discuss at the last meeting the desire to outline in greater detail the pricing breakdown. So the number comes to you, and of those things that we recommended, and we did hear support for the majority of what was recommended, we've heard that there was just a desire for greater detail. So we've shown that here for you in a way that we hope mimics those things that you're familiar with seeing in other types of construction projects. So this is a complex project with a lot of moving parts and pieces, and we wanted to show it here, not just with that final number, but also kind of itemized in a way that, like I said, you see in other projects. So just starting at the top, the list represents the full option. So all that we brought forward to you last time, which would include all of those improvements, including the air handling units at the community center, chiller, pool pack, improvements in weatherization and HVAC at our other buildings, and the street light replacements. So that material and labor cost is represented there in that first line. Good evening. And then project contingency, a rather, I would say, conservative contingency. That number still, though, as it would in any project, if that is not spent, would come back to us and would fall off of that pricing sheet. The nice thing, and we'll go into more detail about that at a later slide, but there's no change orders in this project. So that contingency is a little more flexible perhaps than it might be in some, because we have someone on the ground working through it with us with no change orders. So professional services costs, we've tried to break them out here so that they reflect what you might likely see elsewhere. Energy and design engineering. So I will say too, and we'll talk about this on a future slide as well, a lot of this money has been spent. So in working with the city, CTS Group, our chosen consultant, has been designing a system that works for us. So that's all the complexity of the systems that work and give us fits some days on over here at the community center to design a solution that will work for us, that they've done at risk through this work. Because in order to recommend a project that will be guaranteed to pay for itself, they needed to know the final answer, what was going to be designed. So a large portion, probably not all, but a large portion of that has been spent already on our behalf. The measurement and verification is reflective of the number that comes about as a part of the safeguards that the state puts in place for us. So what we're talking about here is a system going in, and on day one, we know for sure that it will perform the way that we want, so that it will provide the savings that we need in order to pay for the project that we've outlined. And that's not the case in other types of projects. So that safeguard comes to us because we're saying if something goes wrong and the system doesn't perform the way that we anticipate, we would be hard pressed to save the dollars to pay for the project. So we need to have that guarantee in place. And if something goes wrong, CTS Group is on the hook to fix that for us. So that guarantee and that measurement and verification for 3 years following the investment is reflected in that number. Then the system commissioning and training, that's to make sure that we optimize the systems that we have in place. So now is no surprise, we have a pretty antiquated management tool for the energy that we use. And this reflects a very updated and user-friendly method of measuring and making sure that we're controlling what energy we use, we're using it the way that we want to use it, and obtaining those savings. So obviously we'll need to train the people that are here on the ground using the system, and also to monitor the system so that we can learn and adjust and make improvements in how that we're using that at a later date. Construction management, on-site manager, we'll talk more about this again in the future slides, but That piece is critical to us, of course, as staff and as patrons of this building in particular, but knowing that you have occupied buildings that are going to need this level of renovation and upgrade, managing that. We also have known from working with CTS Group over these months that they will be working with up to and potentially more 9 subcontractors. So that person is managing all of that work, that coming in, going out. I can't even imagine, but all of that is in that one person and reflected in that, which if the city were to do that at this scale and at this pace, we certainly would need to hire someone else. That is not in anyone's current job duty, and especially the coordination to minimize the interruptions. That's quite a bit of coordination. So that's trying to reflect that number there. The Esko fees, we have the state outlines some of this for us. When we engaged in the contract with CTS Group, there is a cap on this fee charge to the city, and that's a protection for us. It includes the overhead and management of the project getting us to this point, and then also the above and beyond profit to the company. They are a for-profit business and they're working with us, but that number is reflected there. It's capped, as I said, through a pre-approved agreement with the state of Kansas to make sure that the city is protected and that that rate is competitive, but it is reflective of the work and time and expertise that CTS puts into the project as we have it moving forward. Then that FCIP fee, again, paid to the state for their administration, that reflects the time that they have spent getting us to this point, as well as reviewing the investment grade audit report that outlines our guarantee. So CTS spends a bit of time outlining the recommended improvements, and then that moves to the state for them to review. So they sharpen their pencils and make sure nothing has been inflated, everything makes logical sense. There's nothing, there's no shell game going on to secure, what the outcomes will be. And these are engineers from K-State looking at our projects. They walked through our facilities with us every step of the way, so they know the system and the recommended energy improvement measures just like we do. And this is that fee based on the size of the project reflected there. So that total turnkey installed cost is what you've seen before, and that's the number that the staff is recommending. Next slide, please, Dan. So we just wanted to reiterate again, I think I did it somewhat walking through those numbers, but the traditional bid and build design you see on the right, the performance-based design build function that we are recommending here through taking on the FCIP project and embarking on this program. We really like the phrase, single point of accountability. That's CTS Group. So you're taking staff, out of that driver's seat. Once we've approved this project, we have a helper in the project coordinator and the whole CTS team to guide us through all of that, rather than us, likely taking these projects piece by piece and going out for bid for each one. And, there's a lot of interconnectivity between the elements, especially in the community center building. And so managing all of that would be tricky. And in order, the contractors they've worked with, they've guaranteed that price for us, and that's what's reflected in these numbers. And so those what you see is what you get if we stick to this timeline. And I mean, you can continue to read through. I don't need to go into all of it, but that comprehensive no upfront fee required. Like I mentioned, CTS has proceeded in good faith with us on this. We knew even at the interview phase that they were willing to perform the investment grade audit, to do all of the research, and to come up with that recommendation for all the improvements, and wouldn't charge us if we decided not to move forward, which not every company does. So they're the guaranteed maximum price, again, no change orders. Again, a project of this complexity, it's hard to imagine that there not be something that goes not to plan, and having this protection is really something. And we feel like it's a good investment there. And of course, on-site project management and those verified and measured savings. Yeah, so, and I think one more slide potentially, just if there's anything I haven't covered. CTS Group understands managing occupied buildings. They've done work at community centers. They understand that, especially coming off of the pandemic and the closures and the limitations of our patrons in this facility in particular, it's a more sensitive time than it might have been otherwise for closures and upgrades. So they'll be working with us really closely to minimize that. And they've come to us talking about that. That's a really clear understanding that they have on their part. We do recognize, the existing reality of our staff with the current skill level and the workload that we each have, what this would look like if we didn't move forward with the FCIP model. And it is really hard to imagine. And that front loading of it rather than the phasing of it, I think not only does it, not only does it kickstart the energy savings and the environmental benefit that kicked off all of this when the state first came to the Sustainability Commission and talked to us about that. We start getting the environmental benefit as soon as these things are installed, but also we can move on to other things and the staff can be focused on other priorities from day one. And that's just a really good feeling from where I sit. And then also, so the CTS has worked over with us about the communication plan and clearly talking about interruptions. That part is important, but also celebrating the project successes. That's important too. And we'll be working together to build that out and make sure that that's clear to everyone who's impacted and even those who are not impacted. We'd like to talk about our story. And then just this, the final thing, the reason that we started this discussion to begin with, the building deficiencies, the Band-Aid, the uncertainty and the, I'll say it, fear of what might happen to the systems without this comprehensive approach. We take care of that with this program. We enhance the comfort and energy efficiency of the building, the power that the staff have to manage the systems that are in each facility, and that environmental benefit that we wanted to see from the outset. Next slide, please. And then we have just the final staff recommendation. We still do believe that the full options are good. Going at this confidently and all up front and making sure that we take care of what we know needs to be taken care of with the LED retrofits, the HVAC impacts, all the things that that we've been discussing, and as well as the streetlight replacement and the chiller and pool replacement. And so I know we included in your packet and have even greater detail now on our debt options. So if we have questions about anything or that, we can switch to a different slide and Laura might take some of that depending on what your pleasure is.
We can, but why don't we pause here and see if anybody has
Sure.
any questions relative to just scope and or the fees outlined, and then we can kind of move into, that'll help guide our discussion, I think, on the next step, which is how would we pay for
Okay.
whatever we select.
Very good. Thank you, Emily. Just for the record, Councilmember Rothrock has joined us, so are added to the attendance roster. Are there any questions for Emily? Any comments?
Yes, Nate.
Ken?
Yes.
I have a couple of questions about the costs. So the $129,660 for the on-site project management, what time frame are we talking about this project going over? So is it a month project, 2-month project?
So we've estimated, nod your head if I'm correct, Ellie, but we've talked about mobilizing as soon as we have approval. So that would be this month if all goes well, and being finished by, is it January of 2022? And that allows for a lead time of some pieces of the equipment.
So roughly 6 months.
Yeah, and some of that, I mean, you could speak to it more, but the staggering to minimize impacts, and not all of it there's a bit of phasing there, but not
Is
much.
that a full-time person, 40 hours a week for 6 months? Or what? 129,000 seems like a lot of money for on-site construction. Because it's not a 40-hour a week job, is it?
I'm not sure of that. I know that anytime anyone is in the building, that project manager would be there.
Okay. So we're paying 130,000 for 6 months of someone's work
Yeah.
for
Just-
management.
And I can repeat, Ellie, or
Yeah,
you
please-
want to
please,
repeat your answer?
Yeah, go ahead. We've got a mic for you.
I said, yeah, it will be a full-time on-site project manager. And then also, we might oftentimes have multiple project managers because of the multiple buildings and the streetlights going on at the same time. You know, we might have to bring in multiple people.
So you mentioned it was 9 projects, but we have multiple managers. Is that
There's 9 subcontractors.
subcontractors? I'm sorry.
Mhm.
Again, this, I like the concept. I like the process. These costs, I'm just not used to seeing these level of costs. There's usually a standard within the construction industry of how much you spend on construction, how much you spend on whether it's inspection, whether it's design, and these just seem high to me. I'm still not sure that, you know, you have $432,000 in fees for general conditions, administration, and overhead. Again, that's a very broad category. I know you have to make a profit. I know you're a for-profit company, but that just seems, again, some of these numbers just are not within my
Yeah.
perception of a project.
I would say 3 to 5% is usually pretty common for a project manager and the construction and what projects that we've done. And then usually, I mean, a lot of times with a general contractor, I mean, you even have like up to 20% in, you know, general construction and fees. So, I mean, we're at less than, or just a little over 12% on,
Well, I thought your fees were about 35% of the total cost when I added them all together. Did I make, because I took, maybe I didn't do my math wrong, but I had it almost 35%. That's why I'm asking these questions. It seemed very high. Are you saying you're only 12%?
All
For the-
I would add is that when you're talking about our fees, you're talking about, that also includes engineering, light architecture, the project management. So if you would look at it more like in the traditional sense, you would have a separate company that might be the architectural firm, as well as the engineers that might fall under them, and a construction management company that would come in. So really, I mean, the way the FCIP state program organizes it, it does make it so it's very competitive and actually less when you look down the line of, you know, to compare them what a typical cost would be for under a standard or the traditional construction format. It's actually pretty significantly controlled and less in a lot of ways.
And then the contingency, you said there was a no risk, this is a no risk project. And then I guess there's 107,000 to play that if something is not go the way you think, you can draw on that 107, but you can't draw more than that. Is that, okay.
Any other questions? Are there any folks on Zoom that want to ask anything or comment? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, I
Councilmember
just
Farr.
had a question, since we don't have, you know, the line item detail on the professional service costs versus the Esko fees. Are the professional service costs quoted like at cost and all of the profit is built into that Esko fee? Is that how it's structured?
Oh, did I? I'm sorry. I thought that project question was going to be for Ellie. Sorry. I'm worried about microphones. I'm sorry. Could you repeat it, please?
Yeah, so I just had a question about the professional service costs and the Esko fees categories, recognizing that we don't have sort of, you know, line item detail here, but I was wondering, because you were talking about the overhead and the profit in connection with the Esko fees, if that meant that all the professional service costs listed are at cost and the profit is all contained in that Esko fee, or is there, you know, a markup
Oh, a little
in
bit.
both areas? Yeah.
yeah, those, the professional services costs are costs, and then the markup is in the profit and everything is in the Esko fees.
Any other questions? Did that answer your question?
So I think what we tried to illustrate with the way we broke these project costs out, and it's, showing the true construction costs, again, based on the bids that CTS has secured from the various subcontractors. That professional services cost category, some portion of that, if we were to not do this project in connection with the FCIP program, would still be costs that the city would incur. So we would need the engineering design. The only thing there that you might make a different decision about if you weren't looking to meet the parameters of the FCIP program would potentially be that measurement and verification piece of it. So if you weren't looking to, if there wasn't the guarantee of the energy savings for that 3-year period, we might make a different decision about measurement and verification, but we might choose to do measurement and verification based on our own sustainability goals and objectives and trying to understand the impact that this project might have in terms of just our overall energy usage. So that professional services cost is intended, to kind of break it out and say, if we chose another path to accomplish this, then that roughly $502,000. And again, there could be some flexibility in there depending on who you hired or number of hours you had for an on-site manager. But generally, those would be fees that we would incur. And so then you're looking at those, that $432,000. And I think, and Emily touched on it, but I think, CTS has assumed risk or assumes risk at various points in this project. So a lot of the work that they've done to date is certainly at risk. If we were to not proceed, that, guaranteed maximum price essentially, or no change orders, allows us to go into this. They assume that risk. If they have a subcontractor who underbid a portion of that, they have to make up that difference. And then they also have that guarantee of the energy savings that they have estimated for a 3-year period, which is roughly based on their estimates about almost $100,000 a year. So potentially $300,000 that would be guaranteed as a part of this program.
Other questions?
What does general conditions, how do you define that?
The term general condition
What is it?
under the Esko fees?
Well, I mean, I think that's, I don't know what all that, what all that might include, but that's just the other cost that you might incur in putting together a project. I mean, this one's a little bit difficult to do the line item fees, and we typically don't see a line item breakout of, profit, if you will, or overhead that's often built into the line items. This draws it out a little bit more specifically just because of the way that the program is structured and the caps that the state places on the ESCOs who are performing this work.
But yeah, it would be like, we'll have to have, all the dumpster safety, the what else? Administration, all the contract administration, all the, our profit overhead, the payment and performance bonds, insurance, all that kind of stuff's all under that general conditions as well. So all that would be included in that fee.
I have a comment.
Warranty, all that.
Yes, Trent.
Yeah, I just want to speak favorably to this program. I think we're maybe losing sight of kind of the big picture impacts of what we're going to be getting out of this. I'm especially comforted by the single source of accountability that Emily said. These are, in my opinion, these are things that we need to do anyway. And imagining us going out and trying to tackle them, one by one, rather than having this nice, responsible package kind of teed up for us in a way that ensures our protection and also pays for itself down the road. I mean, I think this is a rare example of a responsible and sustainable and ultimately, accountable project that we need to move forward with. And so I really think that this is something that we need to move forward with, and I will be speaking favorably for it. That's my comment. So no.
Thank you ought to put your mic on.
I agree 100% with Trent.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments?
Ken, I have a comment.
Yes, go ahead, please. Hillary?
Thank you. Councilmember Thomas here. Just to the mayor's point, these fees do seem rather high. I appreciate digging into it, but is there any way that perhaps before our vote in a couple of weeks, we could look at some of the, I think, 60 other municipalities in the state of Kansas that have taken on this program and just get a sense of how their fee overhead has looked, just so that we can, feel a little bit more comfortable in regards to what we're potentially looking at?
And I guess the one thing I would note too is that they're all it's all agreed to by the FCIP. They're all on the website, every competitor, every person, it's all on there. And they're all in line. I mean, ours are right around the same as everyone else. There's some that are maybe a little bit higher than us, and there's some that are maybe a little bit lower than us. So it's all public knowledge. It's all on the website. So, I mean, it's all part of the program, and that's one of the advantages of this program is that it's all been agreed to ahead of time. So I'll just.
And Councilmember Thomas and everyone else, I did, following last week's meeting, reach out to the state for a little bit of that comparison data, just for that comfort bit. And I mean, we're in the middle of a holiday weekend and vacation time, so there wasn't a lot of time to pull exact comparables around, but she did say that it was competitive and that pre-approval process for those contractors, we only reached out or solicited bids from those pre-approved list. Obviously, those are the contractors that are eligible to participate in the FCIP with those published rates that Ellie mentioned. So that bit of it, at least we have that assurance. But in terms of specific examples, we did not pull that within the week.
But it sounds like that's available. And so prior to the legislative meeting, we could go out and
Yes.
collect for and, look for those projects that were more comparable in terms of scope and at least be able to bring that back or provide that to the council.
What is published, it was, I believe, what is published is the rate, the cap on the rate that they would charge for the public. So I'll have to, I can't speak for certain to see what is available now to the project by project detail, but by firm, those rates are set and published and available.
But I mean, I would give one example too, like with the project management, for example, for us, like we think it's very important to have that on-site project manager there for the whole entire time and have them dedicated and have multiple people there. But if we didn't do that, like we would actually make more profit. So, I mean, you're saying, it's a cost to the job, but it's a cost to the job that we think is because of the way that the FCIP sets up the program. It's a maximum markup, but to us, it's more important that we have that person there managing all of those projects and protecting you guys the whole time. So, and that's just something I wanted to add to.
Councilmember Hillary Thomas, did that answer your question, or do you have any other question?
No, that's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Flora.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I appreciate the reminder on the firm vetting process. I think that does help give some comfort because, we're pretty used to evaluating street projects, that sort of thing, but we don't do a lot of building projects here in the city. And so I think hearing, about that state process is a good reminder that vetting has occurred, prior to our engagement as well.
I think there's only maybe 10 or 12 companies that are even on it.
Are there any other questions that anyone has? We ready to move forward with this?
Do you want to talk about financing options?
Well, I
just
didn't know if we were
briefly?
doing that this time, or are we doing that during the Finance and Administration?
A little of both. We
Okay.
can certainly introduce that. And then really the item that's on the Finance and Administration Committee agenda is just kind of that protection for us to be able to reimburse ourselves if we were to move forward with this project.
Okay,
So
yeah, let's go ahead.
I think what was included in your packet And I think what we looked at last week were some scenarios well, we didn't have the cash flow scenarios. So what you received in your packet were a 10-year and a 15-year cash flow pro forma on both kind of that medium level option and the high level option. As Emily mentioned, from staff's perspective, our recommendation would still be to proceed with that highest level option. Really, the difference there is just the rooftop units here at the community center. And as we talked about last week, when we go back and look at operations and maintenance costs, going back a little further than just the 2 years that were captured in CTS's identified savings, we've spent nearly $300,000 to keep those air handling units up and functional. And I will tell you, even although we were able to get it repaired, but the chiller went down yesterday or Monday. And we've had to, look at repairs. So we really are talking about, for many of these pieces, kind of critical infrastructure pieces. But the other thing, so I think what I'd like to do is focus on, in your packet, there is the pro forma cash flow for 15 years with an upfront capital contribution. So we ran the scenario and looked at options in a variety of different ways. And again, as we talked about during the work session last week, we would be looking primarily to the general fund to make the debt service payments on this. That's where the savings in terms of utility bills and energy savings that's where those expenses are currently being paid, and that's where, along with the operations and maintenance expenses, so that's where those savings will be realized. But what we wanted to show you tonight, when we went back and really sort of dug into the 10-year option, we start to get to an annual debt service payment that's closer to $200,000. I think that potentially creates some larger challenges for us on a go-forward basis in the budget. So this week, Emily and Bruce Kimmel, who is also on the call, so if we have questions as we walk through this, Bruce is available to answer those, really focused on the 15-year option with an opportunity to call that bond or that note early, right? So we could certainly look at this if the situation improves. I believe that one of the municipalities that Emily spoke with, they're 6 years, as I recall, into their project with the CTS group, and the energy savings that were identified have exceeded the original projections. So we want to look at a structure that potentially is, manageable, doesn't create an undue strain on the general fund budget, that's predictable. But then that if we have the flexibility, if we realize more savings, that we could certainly pay that off early. So what we've shown you, and again, this is not a decision that has to be made this evening, tonight, or on the 16th, we're looking for that direction on which projects are to be included, and then we can fine tune any financing. So looking at an upfront capital contribution of $250,000 on that 15-year pro forma, you're looking at annual a budget contribution to make that debt service payment of about $100,000 that we would need to come up with. What we also wanted to show, and what I copied and had pen, or I put at your place just now, is that same 15-year cash flow pro forma with a $500,000 capital contribution and no upfront capital contribution. So you can kind of see that range of, with no upfront capital contribution, you're, $116,000, $110,000 annually. With a $500,000 upfront capital contribution, you drop that down to about $80,000 in the first year, but then that quickly drops, to $65,000, $50,000. And then again, with the $250,000 upfront capital contribution, you can look at something more in the neighborhood of just that $100,000. So I think anything in that range from a budgetary perspective, I think staff feels like we could certainly identify the resources to make that. The question is, do you want to take some dollars, either from the general fund or from your Parks and Recreation Sales Tax Fund, and buy down a portion of that upfront? And certainly, we could look at scenarios other than $250,000 or $500,000. But I just wanted to kind of give you a sense of what that range would be if we went into this with no upfront contribution. I don't think we would recommend anything more than about $500,000, because then we really start to impact our ability to do some of the other things that we've identified as priorities.
When does that decision need to be made?
So we would come back very quickly in July to start that conversation to make the decision about a specific financing package.
Okay.
And then I believe, and Bruce can correct me, I believe that would get us, probably we could get through that process and get to market and have bond proceeds available sometime in late August, early September, which is when we would really start to, I think, incur the bulk of the project costs.
Any questions for Laura regarding this particular aspect? Yes, Sally.
Laura, I had one question. It might be appropriate to hold it till later, but I know we've talked before about our general debt policy being 10 years. So how would the 15 fit into that?
So I think if you look at the useful life of the asset, so in many cases we have that, but in the cases where we've extended the life of a note or the debt that we've issued, it's been because the useful life of the asset being financed extends beyond that 10-year period. And so certainly when you're looking at streetlights and some of the other components in this, I think and if you look at that useful life chart that was included, I think that's what would, sort of help us get there. And again, as we move through really our budget process in detail starting next week, we'll be able to identify that. And if we want to shorten it up, we can certainly, find the funds to do that. But I think that's one of the factors that we consider in looking at a longer debt term.
I'm getting this sense that this is ready to move forward. Is there any other questions or any other concerns at this point? I'd like to thank the representatives from CTS for being here today. Appreciate your help, and also our bond counsel as well. Is there a recommendation? Okay. Ready to take it to council non-consent?
Do we need to decide on the lower high or medium or high approach tonight, or do you want guidance on that?
No, I think you should provide the direction on which the medium or the high scenario that you're recommending. What I heard was high based on Councilmember Boultinghouse, I think his original.
Is that the consensus?
I
of
would
the group?
agree with that.
Yes, I
Yes.
would agree with that.
Yes, agree.
Okay, so we have consensus that we should go with the high option, and it would be a 15-year debt. And then the decision is whether or not to contribute the $500,000 out of the current budget.
Correct, or we'll determine what level of upfront capital contribution, if any, we would like to make to the project.
Okay. Mayor, anything else that you have on this? Okay, it's going to be non-consent and for the higher option. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Next, we have the item number 3, which will be the next 3 items actually from Celia Duran, the Director of Parks, Director of Public Works, with the first one being the letter of MAP revision task order for the Rock Creek Channel Improvement Project. Thank you, Celia.
Thank you. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'd like to talk to you about the letter of map revision for the Rock Creek Channel Improvements Project. As you know, the project's complete. we're really excited about that. And as part of the project, there were modifications to the floodplain along Martway adjacent to the creek. So we've reduced the amount of floodplain on land adjacent to the creek. And we made a commitment that once this was done, that we would like to go ahead and do the necessary work to revise the floodplain maps. And so this task order with GBA in the amount of $17,000 would accomplish that. And they would do the modeling and prepare the maps and work with FEMA to get that done. And we're anticipating that that would be completed by the end of December.
Any questions for Celia? It does.
Thank
Very,
you.
Very pleased with. Is there a recommendation on this item? Take it to council consent?
I'm okay with that.
Consent? Okay, we'll take it to council consent. The next item is the Johnson Drive Design Agreement, which stretches from Lamar Avenue to Rowe Avenue.
So as you know, this is our submitted CARS project for 2022, and I won't go into the scope because I think we've talked about it in detail, but if you have any questions on it, I'd be happy to answer it. So this
Celia,
is the,
can you just get a little closer to the microphone, please?
there we go. Is that better?
Much better, thank you.
Okay. So this task order would be the design with our on-call engineer Olson in the amount not to exceed $66,996. So the Roeland Park share is $44,130 and missions cost would be $22,866. And even though the majority of the project is within mission, the cost for Roeland Park is higher based on the survey work that they would need, that we would need to do. They want to look at installing a sidewalk on the north side in their city. So that would be survey work. And if you are familiar with that area, there's a lot of curb work and parking lots. They want us to go ahead and look at that option, but depending on the, whether the landowners want to provide an easement or not. So it may or may not be in the project. So this details the scope of work and the costs, and it is contingent upon an interlocal agreement, which is the next agenda item. So I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any questions for Celia about this item? Anyone on Zoom? Okay, hearing none, is there a recommendation?
Recommend taking to council consent.
Take it to council consent, okay? Yes. Thank you, Celia.
Thank you.
And the next item is the interlocal agreement with Roeland Park. This is a final action that you presented. Go ahead.
So this interlocal agreement really just outlines the purpose, the project financing, and that the City of Mission would be the project administrator. So basically, once Roeland Park agrees and we've approved it, then they agree to pay the portion of design costs for the project. So this is based on another interlocals that we typically do for, shared projects. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Any additional questions? No? Recommendation?
I recommend we take it.
Recommended to take it to council consent.
Yes.
All right, everybody agreed? We'll go ahead and do that. Thank you very much, Celia. Appreciate it. We have a sixth item and final action item for tonight on this committee is the indoor pool slide restoration from Penn Almoney. Welcome, Penn.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor and Council. So the Powell Community Center has one indoor slide that gets used relatively consistently from our youth and tweeners. And due to that impact, chemicals, friction of swimsuits, general wear and tear, it's recommended that we get the fiberglass resurfaced with a gel coating and replace some alignment elements as well as recalking some of the sections of the slide. So over 6 years ago, we did get the gel recoated. Unfortunately, at that time, none of the fiberglass replacement had deteriorated to the level that we've seen now. So some of the elements we talked about: hairline cracks, weathering that occurs just generally from UV and chemical abuse. So back in 2020, we had this as a capital improvement project and had requested bids from 3 vendors. And because of COVID-19 related concerns, obviously we tabled that. Since the pool wasn't even open, it was kind of a non-issue. But because we're now open and using the slide again, it has brought it to the forefront. So of those 3 bids that we got in 2020, all 3 of them have rebid, and those original bids have not changed in price. And of those 3 bids, Safe Slide Restoration was determined to be the lowest and most responsive bidder. And they also have the industry's best warranty, a 5-year guarantee on paint and a 5-year guarantee on fiberglass. So staff's recommending the approval of restoration contract with Safe Slide Restoration in an amount not to exceed $28,100. And that would be funded from Parks and Recreation sales tax, with the project being completed during the annual closure in August. Any questions?
Any questions for Penn?
That, you still have some time to weigh in, council member. Definitely not pink.
Okay, is there a recommendation?
I recommend we take it.
Recommended to
Consent.
take it consent, okay. We'll go ahead and take a consent. Thank you very much,
Thank you.
Ben. Appreciate it. Next, we have discussion item, and this discussion item also calls for Celia to join us again. This discussion item is regarding a grant, federal grant application that's done in conjunction with Mid-America Regional Council. Celia, you want to go ahead and introduce the item?
Yes, thank you, Councilman Davis. So Mid-America Regional Council has invited cities to collaborate on a raised grant submission for bike and pedestrian connections for transit. And they notified us in April, so it's been a quick turnaround that we wanted to go ahead and get some projects in front of you to gauge your interest on whether we want to participate or not. So projects must be located within a half a mile of a transit route, which is on Martway Street. And the grant would pay up to 80% of construction costs. So in order to determine what projects would be eligible, what we did is took a look at the streets that are proposed in our proposed 10-year street preservation plan. We also looked at sidewalks and the condition of the sidewalks to determine, which sidewalks would be eligible. And even though originally I wasn't really considering the Woodson sidewalk because it wasn't in our plan, but in driving around, I think that project really meets the intent of the grant because it's one of the only north-south continuous sidewalks in Mission. The other thing that really stood out to us, it's very deteriorated, a lot of cracked panels, it's older, so the tree roots are growing up next to it. But it is within easement, and we wouldn't have to remove any of the curb because it's not adjacent to the curb, which is unlike many of the sidewalks in Mission. So recommending that project, the cost is $550,000, but our cost would be $110,000. So like I said, normally we're not looking at trying to find ways to come up with new projects, but I think for a relatively inexpensive cost, we can get a sidewalk that otherwise we wouldn't be doing for at least 10 years because the pavement condition is fairly good. It's just that the sidewalk's in poor condition. So I think that's a good project if we decide to go with this grant possibility. The second project would be Knoll Avenue, Johnson Drive to 58th. And this is a project that Roeland Park asked us to submit because on Knoll Avenue on the east side, they have continuous sidewalk all the way down to Mission on 58th Street. And so this project would include filling in the missing leaks there, and it would go all the way down to the wing stand proposed development that's on the northeast corner of Johnson Drive and Johnson Drive and Knoll Avenue. There is a sidewalk on the west side, so residents could walk on the east side and then go over to the west side. But This project is one that we're already going to do anyway in our draft street preservation project. And it would include replacing the sidewalk and then the new sidewalk. So this one's a little less expensive, about 70,000 share. And one thing that I'd like to gauge your interest in whether you want to participate. The second thing is we just got an email from Mark saying that there's been such overwhelming response that they would like us to prioritize, if we want to do these projects, which one we would do. And so looking to see whether you're interested, and then if so, which project would you prioritize to be the #1 project?
Is there a staff recommendation for priority?
Well, you're asking me my opinion. So I would recommend Woodson just because it's sorely needed and in pretty deteriorated condition.
And so you might comment, because we had the same discussion, I think that that request from Mark to prioritize our projects, I don't know whether it came today or, so it is really new. But I think also comment on, because I asked the question about Knoll and the connection with Roeland Park, but talk about how you can travel that route now, I guess, with existing sidewalks.
Okay, so on Knoll Avenue on the east side, there's an existing sidewalk all the way down to Mission's east side. So we would be filling in that link, but they could cross over at 58th Street and walk on the sidewalk on the west. So I feel like the Woodson is more of a need just because it's so deteriorated with, needed ADA improvements.
And the 58th Street at Knoll also has all the ADA to get across the street from Knoll over to the south, going, I guess, on the west side, yeah.
Correct.
Yes.
There's a little slope on the east side, so we'd have to put in a retaining wall and get around some utilities and some trees to put it on the east side. But we wanted to work, Roeland Park specifically asked us, and of course, we want to be good neighbors and collaborate, and
Sure.
both residents of both cities will use the sidewalk.
Any other recommendations in regards to this priority? So the priority would be Woodson. Is there interest in proceeding with this grant application? It
Yeah.
seems like good leverage.
Yeah. Yeah,
So-
I would say let's participate. That's a good split. And yeah.
Okay, recommend to council?
Do we do that?
It's,
since
It's a discussion,
yeah,
never
we're gonna
mind.
go to action.
No, I think we're just looking for, the application deadline is July 12th, if I remember correctly. And so we would just proceed to submit that.
Okay,
Um,
so you've
Yeah,
got,
Yes,
you've got
yes.
group's consent. Thank you, Steve.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. At this point, there are no other discussion items. Laura, are there departmental updates for the Community Development Committee?
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Davis. I would just like to give a brief update on kind of the situation. We had a resident who attended our council meeting last month who expressed some concerns about cleaning and maintenance here at the community center. As you know, when we have people who make public comments at our council meetings, it's not that opportunity for that back and forth debate or discussion, but certainly for us to take in that information and then follow up. But I know in speaking with the mayor, we also felt it was very important to come back and sort of publicly provide an update on conversations that have transpired since then. So Mr. Carpenter, who was the resident who attended the meeting last month, actually reached out to us the day after and requested a meeting. So the mayor and I had the opportunity to sit down and meet with him. And during the meeting, I think he was very focused on solutions and recommendations as it related to specific equipment, cleaning solutions, cleaning frequencies at the community center. So we had a very positive conversation around those items, and we talked very briefly, so he had kind of the list of cleaning items, and then he had a list of more what I would call policy-related questions or concerns. And the mayor did address with him that, we would connect him with the staff here at the community center to address those cleaning issues, but that the policy issues were really the purview of the council. and that we would try to address those as best we can. So I'd like to just very quickly kind of run through the list of things that he identified and just kind of tell you and provide you all with an update on where we are. So the mayor and I met with him last week. Penn had the opportunity to meet with him yesterday and to talk through some of those issues and walk some of the specific areas in the facility where he was making those recommendations. I think both were very productive meetings. And I think as we've really narrowed in the focus, and I think the comment that Mr. Carpenter made to Penn yesterday was that he is really looking to be part of a solution. And so there are some very specific, and I think he referenced in his comments that he and his son have a cleaning business. So he's very familiar with those processes. But many of the things that he's looking at, in general, we've done, I mean, probably we've got 90% of the cleaning done. We're talking about the last maybe 10% where we need to focus some additional effort. And so he and Penn had a good conversation about different types of equipment that might assist us in getting that deep cleaning accomplished in a different way than we have in the past, looking at some different cleaning solutions that might allow for maintenance of that to be easier going forward. And I think that what he and Penn talked about was that Penn would then sit down with our facility and maintenance supervisor, Craig Donner, talk about some of those recommendations, come up with a plan, and then to stay in contact with Mr. Carpenter to just kind of share with him what that plan and approach was. And I think Penn felt like that meeting was certainly productive. One of the things that I know the mayor and I talked with Mr. Carpenter about was there are always two components to every project. So there's time and money. And so while we may agree and be willing to and planning to work on several of these items, our timelines might not always align. And that we would do our best to communicate kind of if there was a divergence of those, what and why, to just kind of help with that. I think, again, some of the other things that he talked about were capacity limitations for the steam room, closure of the adult lounge, and some of those things that were COVID protocols and procedures that have been in place for the last year and that we're starting to slowly kind of roll back. And I think just in general, his preference would be for those to roll back faster than what we've seen. I know he also asked some questions about the daily indoor pool closure. That's something, so the indoor pool is closed from 11 to 3. Part of that is a staffing issue. It's difficult for us to find staff. It's also fairly common in other facilities just based on usage patterns to close down the pool area during that time and just relieve some of that pressure on trying to have to incur the expense of staffing. He also brought up an incident where he believed that we had understaffed a pool party, certainly a safety concern that we wanted to follow up on very quickly. As Penn looked at that, we did have 3 guards who were scheduled and clocked in and working that pool party event. It was actually on a Sunday when the facility was closed to the general public, but we feel comfortable that we had an appropriate level of staffing at that event for our patrons. He asked a question about daily fees and charges for daily fees. Since this was a community center, I think it certainly is a community center, and we've tried to keep our daily entrance fees reasonably priced and affordable. But that is an important revenue stream as people come in the door and use the equipment and the facilities that we have. And I believe that most other community centers in the metropolitan area are charging not only an annual membership fee, but a daily fee option. And then I think he asked that question in connection with, the establishment of the rent and mortgage assistance program and the $15,000 that was dedicated to that, and what was the motivation for that. So certainly try to respond back to him on that. I think we established that was a goal that the council had in response to hardships that our residents might be facing as a result of the pandemic. I think, Mayor, did I miss? I think those are the issues that he raised with us, and I think, hope that we are on the path to be able to open up the lines of communication a little bit more with him, and keep him involved. I think he's been a member of our community center for a long time. Obviously is passionate about this place, and it is a place that he feels very comfortable. So if you have any questions, I can try to answer those, but we did just want to come back and give you that update on the conversations that have transpired since that meeting.
Thank you. We really appreciate the fact that you came back and followed up both with him as well as with us with the information you're providing. Are there any additional questions or comments on this particular matter? Mayor? Okay. Thank you very much, Laura. Are there any other updates?
That's all we have for this agenda. Thank you.
Okay, so it is now about 7:37, is that correct? And with no further discussion, this concludes the meeting of the Community Development Committee. And again, this video will be made public on our website at missionkansas.org. Thank you very much for all of you and for your participation. And I don't know if you want to break or if you want to move directly into finance and administration.
I don't need a
Okay, I
break.
think I'm good.
Okay.
Good evening. My name is Kristen Inman. I will be stepping in for Councilmember Kring this evening. It is now 7:37 p.m. and I'd like to call the meeting of the Finance Administration Committee to order. Again, this meeting is held in person, but in consideration of the ongoing COVID-19 health concerns, we are offering the option for the public to participate through Zoom if preferred. Instructions on how to attend virtually are included in the City Council calendar item listed on the front page of missionks.org. The public is also invited to participate in the meeting. If you are participating through Zoom, please either add your comment in the chat feature and it will be read out loud, or note that you would like to speak and we will call on you shortly to make your comment verbally. Please remember your comments or questions are visible to everyone in the meeting. If you are a part of our in-person group tonight, please raise your hand but stay seated and we will call on you to go to the podium to make your comment. When you make your comment, please state your name and the city of your residence for the record. Also, be conscientious of others trying to speak and speak slowly and clearly. This meeting will be recorded and posted to the city's website at missionks.org. Please contact the administration office at 913-676-8350 with any questions or concern. Is there any member of the public who would like to make a comment now? Seeing none, we do not have any public presentations or hearings this evening, so we will move into our action items. We have, I think, 7 action items this evening. The first action item is acceptance of the Finance Administration minutes from Audrey McClanahan.
Thank you. These are the May 5th, 2021 Finance and Administration Committee minutes for your review, please. Thank you.
Recommend acceptance.
Any comments from the council? All right, thank you, Aubrey. Next, the addition of the city-sponsored special event, which will include alcohol for the Mission Summer Family Picnic from Laura Smith and Penn Alumni.
Thank you. Yes, so we've been sort of in limbo and waiting up right till the last minute with some of the changes in terms of masking and gathering limit requirements at the county level to make a decision about whether or not to proceed with our summer family picnic, which we had to cancel last year. Our goal has been to try to do this if at all possible and to do this as safely as we can, and it looks like we're going to be able to pull that off. This year, one of the recommendations from the Parks and Recreation staff is that we consider adding a beer garden component. And so that's the specific request that is on your agenda this evening. As you know, we have to basically pass a resolution that identifies or allows us to consume alcohol in a public park. And so that's what this resolution would do. We believe, and we've also been trying to wrap up permission from the surrounding property owners to be able to conduct the fireworks display. I believe, although we do not have it signed on the dotted line, we'd hope to do that ahead of tonight, but conversations yesterday and today look like the property owner is going to grant the permission for that. And so some of you may recall that in the past, we had to waive our ordinance in order to shoot the fireworks. That was because we were not using a professional firm to discharge the fireworks. Because we are doing that with Walden Company, what is required is a permit. And so we will ask, assuming we get the permission from the property owner by the end of this week, we will have Wald complete that permit, and it will be on your June 16th agenda for approval. Basically, it's pretty standard application, and we've sort of checked all the boxes. But that will be coming back to you, and I know at that point, we can provide some additional details and update just in terms of some of the other modifications that we're making for the event. There will still be free food available, but we're looking at prepackaged options and some things like that. So still trying to create and maintain some of the history and traditions from that event and reducing touch points and log jams of places where people might be too close. So.
Oh, go ahead, Dan. Sorry.
It's all right.
I'm kind of rusty on this, folks. I apologize.
I think the beer garden's an excellent addition, and I'm glad to hear that. I understand Rotary Club is going to be the one that's.
We're exploring that. That it may be a larger event than they wanted to
handle.
dip into initially, but we'll hope to get that wrapped up.
But we're excited. I certainly support this and would recommend that we take it to council on consent.
Agreed.
I have a comment.
Sure, go ahead, Hillary.
Thank you. I think this is a great idea. I would just encourage us to make sure there's wine there too, be it equal opportunity alcohol distribution event for us wine drinkers.
I can bring a box. I'm kidding. So are the Krings not doing it like they normally have? Okay.
No, so last year, or in 2019, we made the transition to Walden Company.
Okay.
And so we had them under contract, and actually the fireworks are paid for because we had them from last year and they're, carryover. So that's good. We're excited to be able to offer that.
And they'll still be good.
Yes. We didn't save them from last year. We just prepaid half of it, and then we'll get fresh fireworks. Although I do hear that fireworks are in shorter supply this year.
Oh, wow. Any other questions? All right, we will move on to our third item, which is the contract for crossing guard services from Chief Madden.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I am here before you to ask permission to engage with the crossing guard contract for the city for the 21-22 school year. In the past, we have provided crossing guard services for students at Rushton and Highlands Elementary. We have been in contract for several years with All City Management Services, which we have enjoyed our partnership with them. They have proven to be good, reliable firm for us to handle these with. This year, they came back with a 7.7% increase, which should estimated to be $1,288 a year increase.
All right, thank you, Chief. Any questions?
I recommend this go to council consent.
Consent sounds
Agreed.
good. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, moving on to the next item 4 from Laura Smith, starting with the final certification of costs for Roeland Park Townhomes for the Rock Creek project.
There, is that better?
Perfect.
Okay, I have the next several items, so it's probably better for me to speak from the podium. So Final certification of cost for the Roeland Court Townhome projects, as most of you remember, back in August of 2017, following a pretty significant rain event. There was a subsidence in the parking lot at the Roeland Court Townhomes that took out a substantial area of their parking and drive areas that served those properties. It was determined to be a private property issue, but obviously just based on the size and scope of the damage that occurred, the residents at Roeland Court were certainly anxious and looking for some way to address this problem and solve this problem in a way that was financially manageable for them. After a lot of conversations with staff and the residents, the solution that was ultimately presented was the creation of a community improvement district. We often think of the community improvement districts or CIDs as levying an additional sales tax, but the legislation allows also for a special assessment component, and that allows us on private property, as opposed to a public benefit, special benefit or special assessment district, to assess costs associated with a project and tie those back to the specific property owners for up to a 22-year period. So as we went through the contract negotiations and design of the project, we also had, as you know, the Rock Creek Channel Improvements Project, which we had been discussing for several years. Didn't get the SMAC funding that we thought we were potentially going to get for that, but the council felt that that was a high priority stormwater improvement project. And so we advanced that project and then looked at tying in the repairs and the improvements to the Roeland Court Townhomes as a part of that. So on the front end, as we were approving that contract and creating the CID district and doing all of that, there were a number of steps that required us to hold some public hearings and provide notification and establish a protest period for the property owners. We wanted to do all of that up front before we committed to the actual construction contract for that project, so that we didn't get to the back end of a project, potentially look at ownership changes, and then find ourselves with not having, you know, a significant, it was about $400,000 we were estimating to be contributed to the project. So we have now completed the project. The final costs have been certified. And so the remaining step that we have before we certify those assessments to the county to be included on tax bills going forward is for the council to take formal action to certify the costs. And then that will open up a 30-day window in which any of those property owners can prepay all or a portion of that special assessment. That gives us an opportunity to take that in, make any adjustments that might be necessary before we take that and present that to the county clerk in connection with our 2022 budget submission. So what we did when we established that CID and passed that ordinance in July of 2019, which was ordinance number 1503, is we set a maximum annual assessment. So we took on a little bit of risk there, but we had a pretty good feel for what the project cost would be. That maximum assessment for each property was set at $20,040. As we got final project costs in and are certifying those, or looking to certify those on the 16th, those came in slightly below that estimate. And so we are looking to certify, you'll see on Schedule 1, $19,838.40 for each property, again, to be spread over a 22-year period. So in the neighborhood between $800 and $900 a year additional assessment. But if you've been over there, and Celia and Brent have had more contact, but I think they're very pleased with the way the improvements came out. I think it's been a very productive, collaborative solution for the city. And so look forward to kind of truly getting this one across the finish line 4 years later. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Good job on coming in at Regis. That's always pleasing.
Very good.
All right, so Ken.
Yeah, now on this one, we would probably want to non-consent, is that correct?
I think, yes, I think this would be appropriate to be on the regular agenda.
Okay, so we'll go ahead and recommend that it be put on the regular agenda.
All right, great. Thank you, Laura. It looks like that you're up next for action item number 5 is the ordinance approving the street sales tax ballot language.
Yeah, so really over the course of the last year, as we've looked at the work that we've done on our street asset management program, revamping of that street preservation program with a focus on our residential streets. We've also been talking about the need or the potential for renewing the existing sales tax, which is dedicated for street maintenance. That sales tax, as we know, will sunset on March 31st of 2022. So in order to have no lapse in the collection of that sales tax, we need to have a decision made by December of this year and communicated to the state Kansas Department of Revenue. We've had a series of work sessions since February to focus more specifically on timing of an election and or amount for the sales tax renewal. Our most recent one being last week's work session on that, and the direction and consensus that staff heard coming out of that work session was to proceed with a September mail ballot election, which has been confirmed by the Johnson County Election Commission, and to place renewal of the existing sales tax on a ballot to renew that at an increased rate of 3/8 of a cent for a period of 10 years to align with the special highway revenues and the mills that are currently dedicated to the street maintenance program. So what you have in front of you this evening is a resolution that has been prepared by Kevin Wempe at Gilmore and Bell, which specifies the ballot language. Once the resolution was passed, this information will be shared with the county and the county election commission. They will proceed to do their work behind the scenes to have the ballots printed and mailed the first week of September with the return date of September 21st. And then by the end of September, we would have those election results certified. So happy to answer any questions on this. Following passage of the resolution, our attention will then turn very quickly to development of the education information plans surrounding all of this, which we've done some preliminary work with Crocs on up to this point.
All right, what questions do you have for Laura? Go ahead, Sally.
Yeah, I just noticed that the language doesn't have anything about it being a renewal, and I just wondered if that's pretty standard and that we'll rely on that marketing piece to convey that it's a renewal.
I can ask that question about renewal.
Any other questions for Laura? All right, well, thank you, Laura. It looks like you're up again. Action item number 6.
Do we need to move on this?
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead. I apologize. Like I said,
Sorry. Non-consent,
yeah,
yes.
non-consent.
And thank you.
Thank you, folks. The 6th item is a resolution of intent to finance various improvements identified through the Facility Conservation Improvement Program, otherwise known as FCIP. Laura Smith.
Yes, thank you. Again, this is something that we have done on previous projects, probably the most recent one being when we constructed the outdoor pool. So sometimes in this process, the design and the construction contract is a little bit ahead of our ability or our financing schedule. And so what we look to do in those instances is to approve a resolution which establishes our intent to finance all or a portion of the project costs through a bond issue. And it allows us then to have a 60-day look back period within which to reimburse ourselves for any costs that we incur related to those projects. So we are not out of pocket for those, if you will. Again, there are two resolutions in this case. So the resolutions help to ensure that the bonds maintain their tax exempt status. And it also signals to the public our intention to use debt to finance these improvements. There are two separate resolutions in your packet because the street lights are treated as a different type of capital asset statutorily than the building improvements. And so that's why we need to cover those bases, why we would need to consider two resolutions. And I'd be happy, the resolutions have been prepared by Gilmore and Bell, and be happy to answer any other questions.
Go ahead, Ken.
So would these be put forward as separate, two separate resolutions as part of the action item?
Yes.
And would you recommend that we do this non-consent or consent?
I think this should go on the regular agenda.
Okay. So I would recommend that we put this on the regular agenda for these two items.
Okay, I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Laura. I believe this is our last action item for this evening. It's the final action item is for the COVID-19 protocols. Laura Smith.
So I know at our last work session or council meeting, there were some questions or comments, direction from the council about kind of going back to review our recommended protocols, practices, procedures in light of CDC guidance that was issued in mid-May. As you'll see in the action item that was presented, from our staff perspective, we are not making any specific recommendations to those things related to the operations of our facilities. As we read the guidance that was issued by the CDC, it related to recommendations for vaccinated individuals and those instances and situations where it would be safe for a fully vaccinated individual to not observe the physical distancing or social distancing and or the mask wearing. And I did include a handout in the packet from CDC, which kind of outlined that. So based on the fact that we've relied very heavily on guidance from the public health entities throughout this pandemic, and the fact that we've also really tried to not create situations where we're asking our staff to distinguish between vaccinated and non-vaccinated individuals in their interactions and potentially create that source of conflict as it relates to the things that we put in place. And I'll touch on a couple of those just as a reminder. Again, at this point, we're not recommending that we do anything different. We'll continue to monitor. Our incident command briefing team continues to meet every week and look at incident rates, vaccination rates, a variety of different things. But we made the change, you'll recall, we made the change here at the community center that we're asking patrons to please wear their mask as they check into the facility and move to whatever area they might be going to for a facility rental event or exercise or basketball courts, and that once they're there, they can remove the mask and participate in those activities unmasked. We feel that in particular continues to make sense. One of the driving forces behind that recommendation last month was the fact that we, starting next week, will have about 100 children in this facility 5 days a week for our Mission Summer Camp program. Those children range in age from 5 or 6 to 12. That's still a population that is not eligible to receive the vaccine. And so just increasing the number of people dramatically who are in this facility, around the clock, at least Monday through Friday, and looking specifically at that population, we're still recommending those protocols stay in place here. With respect to the pool, we had asked that people, as they check into the pool, keep their mask on. Once they got out on the pool deck, the mask could come off. Again, similar situation, just trying to reduce the friction and potential points of conflict there. One of the things I know we also talked about was capacity limitations and some potential misunderstanding in the community about the capacity limitations. We were looking at and originally built our pool plan around a reservation schedule and system to try to just control those capacity limits. I think we still intend to start out that way. We'll kind of monitor that as the season goes along, but the capacity limits of 300 were set based on historical usage patterns. So in 2019, pre-COVID, our average daily attendance at the MFAC was 271 patrons, and that included 180 summer campers at any given time. So the lion's share of the users at our MFAC are our campers. So from pool hours open at 12, from 12 to 3, when the campers are here, there will be a smaller number of spots available. But again, still, we believe sufficient to accommodate what the demand and need has been, both available through a reservation system and walk-ups. Certainly our goal is not to turn anyone away from the MFAC who wants to come use that facility. And then from 3 o'clock until the pool closes in the evening, certainly all of those spots would be available for members of the public, and again, align with what we've seen in terms of just usage patterns. So I think, again, you have given us tremendous, latitude and trust over the last year to kind of make administrative adjustments as things go along. We would certainly look to do that with the pool in particular. And if for some reason the demand far outpaces what we've seen in the past, we do have the ability to increase those capacity limits and make that opportunity available. And I still think make that opportunity available safely for our patrons and our staff. One of the things along the way, or that we recommended is that staff in their interactions with the public are still being asked to wear the masks. Again, we don't have 100% of our staff that is vaccinated. And rather than make that be the immediate issue, we feel like from just a respect standpoint and what the message that we want to send to the citizens that we serve, that encountering them with a mask at this point is still the wisest, decision. Again, we'll continue to monitor that, continue to look at vaccination rates inside in terms of our own internal operations and interactions. We're asking staff and we're giving our staff the opportunity to have conversations and to feel more comfortable as you have groups of employees who may be vaccinated to take those masks off in the workplace. So really our requirement there is, again, in that forward-facing public interaction. The other thing that we had recommended initially related to our public meetings, and I think you'll recall that we actually had made a recommendation that for our city council meetings that staff and council would be masked, the masks would be optional. And that was an area where the council revised that policy recommendation and put in place the requirement that everyone or anyone attending the city council meeting would be masked. So certainly all of those policy decisions are within the council's purview. I think we feel comfortable. We've tried for the last year to not be reactive, but to be very thoughtful in the decisions. We've also, I think, as an organization, been more conservative than some other communities in the metropolitan area, but I think that's has served us well in terms of our ability to deliver services safely, and to a large extent, we've still had some COVID infections within our employee population, but to not to a point where we've had to impact operations in order to deal with that. So would be happy to answer any questions or look at, if there are areas where the council is interested in making policy revisions.
Questions for Laura? Sure, go ahead, RC.
I personally would like to see, especially if employees or outdoor events, I'd like to give them the option of wearing a mask, or I guess more options of wearing a mask when they're outside or if they're vaccinated. And I don't know the guidelines on asking, but if an employee is vaccinated and they feel free to come forward with that, then I think that if they're comfortable, we should give them the option of wearing it or not. And I'm not saying that if you're facing the public, then I respect us having to wear a mask. But if we're within 6 feet of each other or further away, I think that we should, especially with the heat coming on, like Public Works or our officers out on the street, I think that we should give them the option, especially if they're vaccinated, to take off their masks.
On the same level, I've got a question in regards to that. So at my work, they sent out like an anonymous survey monkey kind of survey to find out if we've been fully vaccinated or not. Have we done that from the cities?
We haven't. I think we have a pretty good handle because we've coordinated, quite honestly, the vaccinations for a lot of our staff.
Sure.
So I think we have a pretty good handle on who is and who isn't. And again, we're not at 100%. And where we haven't done that work is in particular with the part-time staff here. That's probably the greatest unknown, the staff that's working part-time here at the community center. I think we have a pretty solid understanding of where our full-time staff is with respect to vaccinations. One thing I would say just in response to Councilmember Rothrock's comment is, and we've talked a lot about this and we've gone back and forth, and I know there are certainly employees who would love to take the mask off. I think one of the concerns that we have is that if you have some employees masked and others not masked, for example, at an outdoor event, are we inviting the public to make a judgment call about the decision that our employees may or may not have made relative to, getting the COVID vaccine? And I think that, part of what was our driving, force or decision making in making the recommendation in the first place is certainly what they do as a vaccinated individual or unvaccinated individual on their own time is becoming something that's, further and further outside of our control and probably should be. But when you're in your role as a public employee, I don't want I don't want people thinking about looking at you and saying, I have a mask on. Are you vaccinated? Are you not vaccinated? And that's kind of just is what fed into, that recommendation initially.
I can understand that. I mean, I think that those assumptions will go in outside of a professional area. I mean, you'll go to a grocery store now and wonder why people are wearing masks or why they're not. And I think that's I think that we have taken the proper steps to make sure that we keep everyone's interests and safety priority. I do agree with this building and mostly all of the action that we've taken up to today, but I do think it is time with the vaccination rates going up and the heat going up. And I would like to know what other municipalities are still requiring masks, just because I know I have visited a few of our sister cities and I walked in and I just was like, I mean, it's really up to everyone's comfort. And that was the thing is I really felt like, oh, okay, it's up to everyone there. And I didn't have that assumption of whether someone was vaccinated or not. And so I felt like we could do that as a municipality as well.
Go ahead, Sully.
Yeah, I just did have one question about if we change that so that the policy is if you're vaccinated, you don't have to wear a mask outside, then, what's the enforcement if you're then staff violating that policy if we're not asking everyone about, vaccine status? And I feel like staff probably has a better sense and comfort level of, do we have enough staff vaccinated that's a reasonable change to make, or are we not there yet? So I would sort of defer to Laura's judgment on that piece.
And I wouldn't say that verifying your vaccination would be a way to go, but I mean, an encouragement honor system, I'm not sure, but I would like to give the option to certain individuals to remove their mask if they're comfortable enough.
If they've been fully vaccinated.
Yeah, and if they're outside, if they're distanced. I mean, we are taking multiple steps to ensure safety and health. And I feel like we've been doing it for a very long time. And I think that we are at a point in which we can loosen up a little bit and trust people that they've either gotten vaccinated or that they're staying home or 6 feet away.
Are you done, RC?
I'm done.
Okay, then Ken, go ahead.
Just to clarify, the public works individuals that are working outdoors, are they required to wear a mask when they're working outdoors?
They're not, right? Outside, when they're working outside, not interacting with a member of the public, they are not required to wear their masks.
And Chief, with regards to the police officers, what's the requirement there?
We're wearing masks anytime we have interaction with the public.
Is that clarify what the policy is, RC?
So even when you say with the public, are you guys allowed to, when you are with each other in a group of people, are you still continuing to wear masks?
Depends on the situation. I mean, what we've encouraged people to do, and I'll give you a perfect example. We had a budget meeting this afternoon with the leadership team, and we all came into that meeting masked. And I asked the question, I'm comfortable taking my mask off, but are we all comfortable taking our masks off? Or, would someone prefer that we wear the mask? And everybody in that situation, we know we were vaccinated and we all took our masks off, right? And so what we're doing is, we're allowing and even we're encouraging the employees to have the conversation. So we have situations right now where vaccinated or unvaccinated, if it's an employee to employee interaction, we're just asking them to be respectful, right? And if someone is still uncomfortable, put the mask on. But they have the option, and I think, Chief, I think it's pretty fair to say that primarily within the station, their interactions with one another are unmasked. Yes.
Okay, good. That makes me feel better. It was my assumption that we, I guess I haven't walked through Public Works or the station, but I just was picturing everyone having to be masked all the time. And then okay. All right.
Yeah. So when we move around, so when we get up and if I, leave my office and go to the restroom or go get my lunch out of the refrigerator and I'm, moving in someone else's work area, or I go downstairs, I'll put my mask on, when I do that. But within my own office, within our own work group area, after we've had that conversation, if we're comfortable, and it's taking some getting used to. I mean, we're all a little bit like, do we put it on? Do we put it off? And we talked, at length before about, is this a way, what opportunities do we have to use this to incentivize, to use the policy or policy decisions to incentivize, more folks to get vaccinated? And I think we did some of those things. For example, in Public Works, if you have 2 vaccinated individuals, they can be unmasked riding in the vehicle to a job site together. Right. So we've tried to, in those situations, even when they're in close proximity, to provide an opportunity to say, if you're vaccinated, there are a few additional perks that, are available to you. And I know the heat is absolutely a consideration, but we wore them. I mean, last summer we were in the, major throes of outbreak and climbing incident rates and all of those kinds of things. And we survived that. I think overall the overarching, and I don't want, we talked about, on a traffic stop or something like that, I don't want that either the officer or the individual that they're interacting with to be distracted by, you're wearing your mask, you're not wearing your mask, are you vaccinated, are you not vaccinated? I want them to focus on the service or the issue, at hand. So, and we'll certainly, as things change, again, we're still meeting every week, have the opportunity to roll this back. I mean, ultimately, our goal is to be back where, we aren't necessarily having to do this, but also creating the space and the environment for our staff to say, if you're still comfortable wearing a mask, that's okay too, whether you're vaccinated or not vaccinated, so that there's no sort of just judgment or anything that goes along with that.
Have we thought about doing any type of like gift cards or half day off or full day off or something like that if you do get vaccinated? Like they did in Ohio and California.
I know, we've looked at some various incentives. Gift cards, unfortunately, are a taxable benefit, and so it never feels like a benefit for the employees when when we do gift cards. And we can kind of revisit that. And I think, again, also to Councilmember Rothrock's question, I think cities here in Johnson County are all over the board. So I know, for example, Merriam is very similar to our policy. Shawnee, I think, after the CDC guidance, basically said to their employees, anybody and everybody can take your mask off. And so, I mean, we didn't specifically go gather that, because what we'll find is, what we've seen is, and that's everybody's making their own decision. And so we tried to base our decision from the point of how have we approached this over the last year.
So can I?
Sure, go ahead.
I'd also like to, maybe not tonight, but have the discussion of what it is going to take, or what it's going to take for us to feel comfortable enough to either roll back or even put in place more requests for wearing masks. So.
Yeah, and I think we're trying to look at that. I think some of the statistics, and I'm looking to the chief because he's been the keeper of all of the data from the county. We had kind of been tracking incident rates. The incident rates are decreasing, but there's some, conversation around why that's happening. And is that because we're doing less testing in general? So I think we're having those kinds of conversations. We haven't landed on what is the appropriate, benchmark that would cause us to either roll things back further and or see what's happening. And I think the other thing is we really want to be conscientious in saying, what you're seeing in the public is a lot different than what you saw even if, a few months ago, just in terms of, people are ready to take the masks off and do a lot of those kinds of things. And so one of the things we've tried to avoid all along is moving in a direction that would then cause us to have to overcorrect in the opposite direction. So I'd rather be slow and deliberate in moving forward rather than charge forward and then have to, take those things away from everyone. So and we understand, and I think we're looking for what that benchmark is, and we can certainly bring that back in kind of our continued conversations.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Ken.
Yeah, I just want to go ahead and recommend that we move forward with this and carry it to the agenda, maybe the regular agenda.
Yeah, it will probably have to be non-consent. I
Yeah.
think that there's a lot
Right.
that people would like to
Right.
say about it.
Okay.
Thank you. All right, thank you, Laura. We do not have any other discussion items, so we will move into department updates. Laura Smith.
I have just two, and then I'll ask Emily to give you a market update at the end. Just a reminder that next week we will have a work session at 6:30, and it's going to be our first. It will be here at the community center. It will be our first sort of plunge into the 2022 budget discussions. And then I also wanted to let everyone know that I had an email earlier this week that the Direction Finder survey is in the mail. We expect it to start hitting mailboxes later this week. We will be working on an update for our website and a social media post. It's always a little tricky in the language and communicating this because we know not every resident is getting a survey. So finding that balance of, if you got the survey, please fill it out and return it. And then saying, but oops, not everybody is going to have the opportunity to take the survey. But we'll use that to say the survey is one way in which you can communicate with, your city, your elected officials, your staff, come participate in a budget meeting or or other variety of things. So that will be out, and then we'll have survey results back and presented mid-July. So we'll still be in our budget process, which will be great, I think, in helping to inform some of our final decisions there. And with that, Emily.
Should I come up? I was just, can I do it from here or would you like me at the podium? Okay, I just wanted to just remind everyone and invite them to the Mission Market. It opens this week, Thursdays from 4:30 to 8 p.m. So we'll run every Thursday through August. The programming each week will include beer and wine garden with food trucks and live music. So those things are back after a hiatus during 2020. We have the best vendor lineup we've ever had. It's going to be wonderful. And there are a number of vendors still offering pre-orders through our website. So that option and convenience and safety precaution is still available for those who want to just jump in and jump out with what they've pre-ordered. T-shirts are also on sale, both past seasons models and our current offerings for 2021, and it should be a great time. So everyone can get more details on our Facebook or Instagram or Twitter pages, then missionks.org/market for all the details and the vendor links. So see you there.
Tomorrow.
We'll
Great.
see you
Thank
at the
you.
See you there
market
tomorrow.
Okay, it is now 8:21 p.m. and with no further discussion, that concludes the meeting of the Finance and Administration Committee. Again, this video will be made public on our website at missionks.org. Thank you very much.
Well done.